Welcome, everyone, to another edition of Sunday Brunch, which you might look and be like, hey, where are the eggs? Where are the bacon? Where is the food that's located usually where the Bret Hart is? And that's because, guess what? We got a new background because we're doing something special today. On this beautiful Boxing Day special, we are deciding who is better between John Cena and Bret Hart. Why? Because why not? To my side over here, because I forgot which side I'm on, I guess right or left, whatever side. He is in front of me on my screen. That's all I know. We got Bobby Munson from Prairie Pro Wrestling. Bobby, thank you for joining me today. How are you, and how was your Christmas?
Christmas was absolutely amazing. I'm enjoying the holidays. It's cheers and beers and whiskey time here at my household. So having a wonderful time already and looking forward to today's topic. This is going to be fantastic. It's going to be a great, positive fueled day.
Yes, but before we get that, let's make sure we do a little bit of plugging, shall we? Let's plug our sponsors over at Manscaped, which very new to us and we're very much appreciated. Make sure you go to manscaped.com for all your Manscaped stuff, whether you want to protect all your manly parts below there. Use the code word Love Wrestling and get free shipping. I mean, that's kind of nice. I mean, I went on, and if you're Canadian like me and Bobby, you know that when we want to get stuff from the States, it's pretty expensive. So free shipping is pretty nice. And also make sure you give a love to, I guess you want to give a little bit of love to this guy, RK Athletics won, even though I beat his ass on the last week at RCW. And let's just say Papa Bear made Little Bear cry like a little bitch. However, still one of the best physiques in all of pro wrestling, knows his stuff. And if you're not able to meet with him in person, whether it's restrictions, whether it's location, he also does a lot of online seminars and a lot of online work. Now, getting to the chat where we have a lot of people in our chat.
It's hopping in there tonight.
Yeah, we got to say hello to Bobby Bonito. Hello, Bobby. Thank you for joining us. And before Ed said hello, he gave an opinion. So we just wanted to say hello, Ed. Thank you for joining in, and Merry Christmas to you as well. We have Ecto Guy. Hello, chaps. Hello to you too. We also have the Natural, the big time player. Insert any egotistical nickname because it's funny to say when she's around, but we have Astrid, who is an absolute beauty and gem and just a lovely, lovely person. We also have Turnbuckle Tack coming in, which is Carl. That is the KK. That is nothing else. Please, nothing else here. And then we have probably our number one supporter, I would say, or at least one of them, Dara Mason. Thank you so much for coming in. Appreciate that. We are absolutely, Astrid says no, by the way. And Ecto guys, it's Boxing Day. That is why I'm so winded. Yes, cardio gets us all. It is the number one heal in everything, is that damn cardio. And then needs a little short. Yeah, I've been saying that for a long time. So long of a time that we got through half of the Sunday brunch intro. But needless to say, yeah. And then Ed, first comment. This is simple. Seen as a better sports entertainer, he's more charismatic, better on the mic, better face of the company. Brett is a better pro wrestler. Cena over Brett. Now, I said a lot, Bobby. I'm going to let you take us into this.
All right.
Maybe give a little background of how we kind of came up with this, or kind of just like what are you excited to talk about in the battle between the Doctor of Thugonomics and the Excellence of Execution?
Well, first of all, I believe this stems from a conversation we had after we went off the air last week with Sunday Brunch. You had mentioned that you brought this up in a topic, who's better, John Cena or Bret Hart, and it stemmed a lot of controversy, especially, come on, we're in Western Canada. It's kind of hard to go with the idea that John Cena is better than Bret Hart here and not face a lot of heat, which you definitely did. So now I figured let's have this conversation. I figured this would make for an awesome talk today. We both appreciate both these guys from both perspectives. A lot of different things we're going to go over and stuff to decide ultimately who is better. And I mean, we talked about the topics of where do you go and how do you decide what is better. I mean, we know Bret Hart is an absolute ring technician. He is a master inside the ring. Almost nobody better than him inside the squared circle. He knows how to tell a story and has got such a brilliant wrestling mind. But the counter to it is John Cena and his charisma, his enthusiasm, and just the way he stands out. I mean, we're talking about a guy who is now, I believe, tied with Ric Flair for the most championship wins in history. I mean, these are not two no-names that we're talking about here today, Parrish. These are two living legends, two people that I absolutely respect, and I'm looking forward to where this is going to go.
Yeah, and then one of the things I always liked is, even though Bret Hart is a current WWE Hall of Famer, I believe it's very surprising to me that Bret Hart, with everything he's done, still is like, I know he's only going to be like, not only, but he's going to be definitely looked at primarily for his in-ring work, which is undoubtedly some of the best in-ring technical skills I think you can possibly see. I mean, there's a few people today, in my opinion, that could go toe-to-toe, whether it's, a Bryan Danielson, even like a Kurt Angle in his prime. Like, those are two guys. I would always have time in the argument for whether it's, like the stuff he did with his brother Owen, whether it's stuff with Benoit, or even, if you even want to go to the Eddie Guerrero side, that would have been very interesting of a dynamic on there. But then you see John Cena, who isn't known for his in-ring technical skills, yet he has some of the best matches with the AJ Styles, the Roman Reigns, the Sami Zayns, like his entire U.S. championship, whether the matches with Cesaro, like all these guys that you just put on a pedestal above him in that in-ring competition, yet he has absolute classics with. And then he was the guy that basically was the dummy to the creation of Suplex City. So it's very interesting dynamic here, because we are talking about two completely different examples of what a pro wrestler / sports entertainer are. yet they're some of the best in the era that they'd worked. So it's very interesting to go who's the best. And I know you were saying like it was a conversation that we had, but it was also because I watched Rocky Balboa and they had that like who would win in a fight, Rocky Balboa or this current day boxing guy. And well, why don't we do that a little bit more? Like, who would win in a wrestling match between John Cena and Bret Hart? Because as much as people say Bret Hart will have the moves and go and just, fold them up like a pretzel, John Cena is the kind of guy that just smashes the pretzel and, like, eats it for lunch, too. So, I mean, if the bell rang and you saw John Cena versus Bret Hart, how do you kind of look at this match? And maybe let's start with just an idea of how they would fare inside an actual match before we go into like the who actually got more accomplishments and things like that.
For sure. So, I mean, breaking it down physically, John Cena is an absolute beast. I mean, this guy is a power lifter. He's got a great physique on him. We know he's tough as nails. He has been in some of the most brutal fights in the history of professional wrestling, especially in the WWE. We know this guy is tough to break down for any of the competitors that he steps in the ropes with. Bret Hart, I mean, he's very strategic. I mean, on paper, it looks like John Cena, the powerhouse, should be able to overpower Bret Hart and be able to counter or break out of many of Bret's very, signature moves. I mean, including the sharpshooter. If there's anybody that could power out of the sharpshooter, essentially John Cena is the kind of guy that has that ability. Bret, though, is a very strategic, sound mind inside that ring, and he learned that from his father, Stu. So, I mean, this guy is going to go in very over-prepared and ready for the likes of John Cena. I guarantee he would study the tapes. He would look at it from every angle and know what to do, what to counter, and how to break a guy like Cena down so that he could get to the point of slapping on, say, a sharpshooter to try to put Cena out. And I say putting him out because I don't see John Cena as somebody who's tapping out to the sharpshooter. Cena is a Steve Austin in this situation, WrestleMania 13, I believe, where Austin did not tap to the sharpshooter, but he passed out in a pool of his own blood in one of the most epic battles we've ever seen in WrestleMania history.
Yeah, and that's another thing too. Like, to me, I always thought if you wanted to make Rusev at just a day one star, like, of the company, then you would have had him tap out John Cena at WrestleMania to the accolade, and he is the only guy that's tapped out Cena in the modern era. And then, but that's also another thing too. When was the last time John Cena ever tapped out? And we're going back to the early days of John Cena, where he was still wearing gear that symbolized the colors of that team's local college team or whatnot. So he has grown quite a bit, and he is one of those guys that just seems very impossible to say I quit, to make tap out, to kind of get the best of in that realm. But then knowing Bret Hart is a submission specialist and things like that, he won a lot of his matches based on the sharpshooter, and he knew how to get in the sharpshooter a lot of different ways. It didn't have to be just the general setup. If I have your legs, I'm putting my leg in, I'm crossing, I'm flipping over. No, he could get you and twist you in that while you're on the ground. So he's very capable of maybe getting in that sharpshooter while being in the STF. So we just don't know. And that's one thing Bret Hart has the ability to do inside the squared circle that is beyond amazing. It's that the intangible to adapt mid-move, create an area to where you can then put yourself into a different move. Like, he just has all the intangibles of one of the best professional wrestlers between the four ropes. However, John Cena then brings you all the intangibles outside of the ring, whether it's the guy can do just about everything else. Whether if you wanted to do this in a feud, the guy can get in your head from a promo. I mean, nobody's going to knock him on a promo stuff. But then also when it comes down to adapting mid-match, this guy's also pretty good as that because he focuses a lot on his strength as well. My thing is when the match goes, the 20, 30 minutes, we normally don't see John Cena in these long matches, whereas Bret tends to get better with these. So in the realm of this fantasy, who would you give the edge to if the match went longer? Because the one thing I never thought John Cena ever did was even give up when it came to a cardio standpoint. But Bret Hart himself, I feel, could wrestle for a week straight and still not breathe heavy.
When we're talking about the same Bret Hart that went toe-to-toe with Shawn Michaels at WrestleMania for a complete hour with neither guy taking a fall and then went into overtime. I mean, I got to give the edge to Bret Hart definitely on the longevity of the matchup here. I mean, while John Cena is very capable and not willing to quit and stuff like that, I think more the guy like Bret breaks him down in that squared circle using the capability that he has. I think Bret's got the edge in this one, definitely if we go the distance in terms of the length of the match itself. Again, the quicker it goes, again, the power goes to John Cena. I mean, we're talking about a guy whose physical strength is going to help him in the short term versus the long term in this matchup.
And I guess, like, to me, my only counter to that is I've never seen John Cena's power really ever decrease when he goes in longer. In fact, he actually seems to get his second wind, just like Bret Hart's, is absolutely phenomenal. And we can see him go 10, 15 minutes, still pick up guys like Big Show, Mark Henry, the Brock Lesnar's, who are considered some of the bigger guys in the game now. And if he has that power there, picking up a 6'2", 234-pound Bret Hart is like me picking up a 355 milliliter Coors Banquet. It's very easy. I also want to make sure the chat, like, if you guys want to get involved in this, please do so. Let us know your opinions. We will definitely take into considerations. This isn't just Bobby against and I talking about this. This is everyone coming together. It's Boxing Day. We've already unwrapped all the presents. Now we're trying to see, what's a better sale?
I've got an idea that I should bring up here in this one. Who can get to be the dirtier player in the matchup and stuff? Who will be the guy capable of going deep and dark and doing whatever it takes to win the matchup between Bret Hart and John Cena? I want to get your opinion on this one.
Now, again, I think it comes definitely down to the situation because, and I'm going to use this for an example, when John Cena was taken to the extreme in ECW and had to go to the one-night stands to wrestle RVD for the WWE Championship, we saw a completely different side of John Cena. And we saw him get a little bit more nastier. We can see him get a little bit more violent. We saw him get a little bit more aggressive. I mean, hell, he's the one who coined it and is the face of the ruthless aggression era. However, Bret Hart is old school. Let's just say that right now. If it came down to those nitty-gritty like tricks to get the advantage, like if you want to talk about the Ric Flair's dirtiest player in the game type thing, then guess what? Bret Hart not only probably has read that book, he probably can also write his own sequel trilogy. And let's just face it, his Dirtier Player, the books series might go longer than the Harry Potter Lord of the Rings combined. That guy knows just about every trick in the playbook. However, you're not just doing this to a natural in-ring wrestler. You're doing it to a guy who physically wears a headband around his arms. You're talking about a mammoth over here. So whether or not it's like a punch to the groin, which of course that's going to hit every guy, but you're also talking about little tricks that might not actually stun him as much as it would a smaller guy that Bret Hart tends to normally face. Also, we also need to mention this. When it comes to Bret Hart's track record with larger guys and bigger guys, yes, he relies on his head. So when it comes down to this doing whatever it takes to win, he does have that intangible. But when it comes to John Cena, he has done this no matter what the size is. And his record with smaller guys, when it comes down to those things, is actually quite comparable, if not better than Bret Hart with the larger guys.
Yeah. And I mean, I got to give the edge to Cena in this case. I mean, maybe some people don't remember the run as the Doctor of Thugonomics when Cena was at his dirtiest. I mean, he was out there doing whatever it takes to win. When we look at the career of Bret Hart, even when Bret Hart has been a heel, at the heart of it, he is still that hero champion. I mean, even when the WWE went with heel Bret Hart, they went with heel Bret Hart only in the United States. It was a turn against the fans in the United States, and yet he was the most resound babyface all across the rest of the world. And so you got to give the edge to Cena. I believe that Bret Hart, at the heart of it, pardon the pun, is just a great, wonderful guy. John Cena, as great and wonderful as he can be, he's all business and he wants to get the job done. He can go to the dark place, I think, to pick up a win.
Yeah. The one thing I will always say this, when we saw Bret Hart kind of in that time frame where I'm not going to say he was un-American before the un-Americans, but he was definitely more pro-Canadian. With that being said, I think there was no better solution of a guy representing the USA than Mr. Hustle, Loyalty, Respect. And that's kind of another one where I'm like, this is where I think like that would have been so much more fun to watch just from a series every week on Monday. However, when it comes down to kind of that edge, there is something more to who has, the ups on that one, because to me, we are talking about a Bret Hart who knows every little trick. There is something to say to that, because no matter what, like even if he's up in the fireman's carry, he can just, rake an eye or, like take the sweat on your forearm and kind of blind you temporarily and put that in your eyes just so you drop them and boom, Russian leg sweep, boom, bulldog, whatever it takes. That's another thing about Bret Hart. He doesn't necessarily need to do a cheap one. It's just to get that up. And I think he knows more about that, and he thinks on his feet a lot better than John Cena when it comes to the in-ring technical skill. And okay, how do I do it in the form of the pro wrestling match? John Cena thinks maybe a couple more steps ahead. And so he looks at the setup. And that's where it's very interesting. I'm not saying Bret Hart doesn't, but what I really like is you're going back to a couple different things. Bret Hart relies on his technical while we're talking about the power of John Cena. However, John Cena has no shame on going to a small package when it's need be. He has no problem, throwing up a different move when it's need be. So what I find very interesting between these guys, and now I'm going to get to this, it's not so much when the bell is coming and you have, the refs turned. My thing is, who's the better one of when you have gone 30 minutes, you have beaten the crap out of each other? Who can actually find that second, third wind at times and really take your body to that another level to get to the finish line? Because that's really what a great pro wrestler knows how to do. They could bottle everything they felt from bell time to then up and then push even more. And I'm not going to lie, I think I give that to John Cena just because of what he's able to do against who he's done it to. When you have the guys like Brock Lesnar, when you have the guys like Mark Henry, Big Show, Great Khali, and I'm not talking about some of the best in-ring technicians in there, even though some are pretty good. I can also talk about the Triple H's, the Randy Ortons, the Batistas, whether it's the Daniel Bryans, whether it's the Kurt Angles. That guy finds a different gear every single time. And I wonder if that overpowers Bret's, not over executes Bret's, pun intended. But I wonder when it comes to that ring and when it comes to that match, does John Cena's second wind, is it just too much for Bret Hart's?
In a one-off, I think you might be onto something. Here's the thing. Bret Hart's adaptability tends to come in the form of his second opportunities. And I'll harken back to the first time that he ever locked up with Yokozuna at WrestleMania 9. Bret was not ready for the pure size and speed of a guy, the form of Yokozuna. Nobody was at the time. And it took another full year for Bret to really adapt his game and understand Yokozuna's game to come back at WrestleMania 10 and finally get that victory over him. So, I mean, if this was a a series of matchups. Yes, I do believe that whatever John Cena throws at Bret Hart the first time, Bret will adapt and get that much better in a second matchup. We're talking one-off, and I think you nailed it with John Cena on this one.
Yeah. Ed coming in with a very interesting point here. Can we compare the 5 moves of Doom to Bret's setup to the sharpshooter? I think people forget the ending a lot of Bret's matches were very textbook and predictable, and Cena has always ragged about it. I wouldn't care. Sorry, I'm going to definitely take the lead on this one.
Yeah, go.
I don't think John Cena is ragged about his 5 moves of Doom. I think John Cena is ragged about how the lack of believability comes with the 5 moves of Doom, whether it's the 5-knuckle shuffle. And I think The Rock also he doesn't get it as much, but I think he should with the people's elbow. They're both very fluffy moves. Whereas Bret, it's definitely like he just makes it look believable, like he can do it to anybody, and that it's actually effective. Whereas John Cena just looks more hokey. I will admit that John Cena has done a lot more hokey in his career than Bret Hart, but I don't blame that necessarily on the performer. I blame that with the time of the industry at the time. Let's just face it, WWE, where it's gone since maybe the Attitude Era, has gone into a lot of hokey times too. So it's just an attitude adjustment, if you will. Bret Hart's, yeah, and I think too, like back in the 80s, early 90s, you definitely saw a lot of predictability when it came to the finish of the matches. But with that being said, this is where I will throw, Bret Hart against Davey Boy Smith at SummerSlam 92, those kind of matches, whether it's Bret and Owen at WrestleMania 10. Yes, I'm also giving you examples, 2 examples of where, different finishes that you didn't see coming and he lost, but that's not the point. But I think too, like he's very understandable, Bret is, that when it comes to a situation, what's a believable finish between the 2 competitors there? Whether I will say this about John Cena, it's usually a big move or a big move that leads to a submission that, let's be honest, the STF is not the most amazing looking submission in the game. However, when you get his hands in there, Edge will tell you flat out, he could choke you out without even knowing. So, I don't know, like, what do you have to say about that? And hello, Throwback. How are you doing, brother?
I also got to think back to, like, I don't know how predictable every Bret match was. I mean, there again, you could go back to the fact that, every episode of Superstars or even Monday Night Raw, as it started to kick off during Bret's title runs at the beginning, he was out there challenging, pretty much mid-card guys that you could guarantee Bret was coming out clean, but he was trying to give the title some prestige, give opportunity to guys who don't normally get a title match on television, which was kind of nice to see back then. I mean, I also think, like, there's a lot of times that he had moments where the match didn't end exactly like you thought. Again, him and Owen at WrestleMania 10 is a perfect example, but then him and Owen in that steel cage, I still think back to them climbing on the other side and him shoving Owen's foot right through the old blue squared cage and then hanging Owen upside down so that he could drop down to take the victory of the matchup. And those moments really stick with me as a fan from the 90s growing up and everything like that, witnessing that and it standing out. I mean, maybe it's harder for me because when John Cena started to hit his stride, I'm an adult by this time. I've seen a lot of wrestling and maybe it just didn't click quite as much for the moments and everything. But yeah, I mean, Cena tends to go with the big finishing move where Bret can surprise you sometimes. So I got to say, Bret, I don't think his matches are always exactly predictable in every way.
No, but I will also say this: when it came to John Cena and AJ Styles, like, they also gave me matches where I didn't. You can always assume with nowadays, where if you've watched enough wrestling, you can kind of always assume they're going to go into a direction. I don't think I'm wrong when I say that. Like, when you and I are going into watching a show, we can always assume that, a finish is kind of likely. And, like, we can almost ballpark kind of what that finish is going to look like. But my thing is, when it comes to how you get there, and if it's different, the move is then secondary because it's just more of a reflex and not so much a decision with that. And I think John Cena's strength reflexes are absolutely amazing. And especially when you see smaller guys where it's like, I'm going to jump off the top rope, and his ability to catch a guy into the attitude adjustment, or whether or not it's, like I can just, instead of catching you, I can just pie face you down, STF, I'm in there. To me, they're very more simple examples of getting more creative into your finishes, whereas Brett always found very creative technical ways. So it depends on if you're looking at this from a creative technical standpoint, if that's your, cup of tea, but also if you're more of a visionary, just like wanting to see something kind of unfold, the brute vision and the perception of John Cena getting into his moves just from a feat of strength like that is also quite impressive as well. So like you kind of mentioned, like when we grew up, we kind of do appreciate more of that technical skill. Also in Western Canada, we kind of go to that route. We like that storytelling through the sense of a wrestling form. But with John Cena, it is about just getting the job done. And how can we get there? And I don't know if they're going to ever be considered predictable wrestlers, but I will say that they do have a knack on getting into the same thing. But, I mean, it's pro wrestling. Who doesn't get their shit in, brother?
Yeah. Here's the one thing we can argue is that Cena was extremely good at making a set of moves that were common to his arsenal that he got over. That was John Cena's skill set. Brett uses a lot of technical stuff. And when it comes to the technical stuff, if you're a technical guy, you tend to use those technical moves over and over again. And so, I mean, in terms of creativity and getting over their move set that was strictly theirs, John Cena, the 5 moves of doom, the 5-knuckle shuffle, you can call them silly and all that, but they got over as John Cena move sets. You know them as John Cena move sets, and that's the one thing he definitely edges Brett out over.
Yeah, and I kind of made this comparison when we were talking. But if I'm going to compare these guys to, say, quarterbacks, when I think of Bret Hart, I'm thinking of a very, very smart individual who is very good at what he does. He normally doesn't do a lot incorrect. And because of that, his ability to succeed is very high simply because he has a vision along with a skill set to get the job done all the time. His ability to adapt in a situation is very strong. So I kind of compare him to a Peyton Manning, because Peyton Manning, as to football, is a very similar way. So this comes into Joe Montana. Throwback. I'm getting there. I'm sorry, but I'm going to say Peyton Manning is a better mind of football than Joe Montana. But again, like when I look at somebody who's not really exceptional at anything specific, but really good at a lot of things, and then really knows how to explore weakness through his own strength and kind of like there, I think of a Tom Brady. I think of John Cena. And then when you look at this, John Cena and Tom Brady won more championships than the counterpart Bret Hart, Peyton Manning. So it's something really to consider, because in the mind of a pro wrestling kind of career, your goal is to always become the champion. Your goal is always to become the best of the group that is competing against you. John Cena did that 16 times, which is tied for the most ever. So at the end of the day, if you're thinking, okay, championships are your dictator of who's better, it's really hard to argue against John Cena's 16-time world championship reigns. However, this is not necessarily a thing we can say about who's better based on championships, because that's only one side, because perhaps the argument can be made that Bret Hart was not in as many championship matches as much as John Cena, or Bret Hart had longer title reigns than John Cena. Both, I believe, are very, very acceptable arguments here, because I will say, when it comes to being the champion, Bret Hart did stay champion, I believe, longer by reign on average. John Cena just did it more times. And then we also look at longevity, and that's why I'm going with Peyton Manning, Tom Brady, because John Cena also has done it longer than Bret Hart, which is kind of weird to think about.
You know, when we talk about the title runs too, we got to think Bret Hart, not just known for the world championship, but a very prominent intercontinental championship that he held with pride, and had some great classic matchups over that title as well too. And then go back to his early days with the WWF, when he was known as one half of the Hart Foundation, one of the most notorious teams in all of wrestling history. These guys were two of the best, and he was known as a great tag team champion as well too. So there is a bit of a diversity to Bret Hart's game there that John Cena maybe didn't have in his career. But yes, John Cena, yeah, I mean, you're talking 16-time world champion. I mean, that's the top of the ladder. You can't argue it. I mean, he definitely had more reigns overall. Bret did have some longer ones, but you could argue that John Cena had more fierce competition at a time in the early 90s where Bret's competition wasn't as stiff. He had a longevity feud with his brother Owen, that was fantastic. He had a short feud with Bob Backlund that I thought was incredible back then as well too. But you know, I mean, he did get the best out of some other guys. Like, for example, one of Kevin Nash's best matches in history, I believe, was against Bret Hart as well too.
Yeah, I think that's something to also say. Sorry, we're just getting into a lot of comments. Want to make sure whose weakness is more detrimental to their long-term image: John Cena's in-ring ability or Bret Hart on the microphone? Before we get to that, because I think that's a really good statement. But doesn't that even out Cena not winning the IC title and also holding the US title, the Open Challenge, etc., but seeing Bret as the old Boston Garden was the life change? I mean, yeah,
the IC title and US titles were a lot more prominent and well respected during Bret's time. You could make that argument as well too, but I mean, that's splitting hairs. I mean, you're not completely wrong at all by any means. I actually don't disagree with the comment made.
No, sorry, I'm just going to go back to Ed's because I really liked his point. More detrimental to the long-term image: John Cena's in-ring ability or Bret Hart on the microphone? I'm going to say this is all depending on what time you're in, because if John Cena's in-ring detriment was so bad to him, he still became a 16-time world champion. So I don't think it was that much of a detriment to John Cena. Whereas if Bret Hart was a better promo, whether he was stronger on the microphone, I think the argument could be made that he could very well have landed more opportunities outside of wrestling, like a Rock, perhaps. However, I don't think it was a detriment, because in the time that he wrestled, the in-ring was definitely more of a high focus back then. And he had a lot more freedom in the ring, whereas nowadays we're looking at pro wrestling in the WWE banner-wise with a lot more microphone time, a lot more promos. So you kind of have to be good on that realm, whereas you don't see the longer matches as often as you did back then. So it's kind of I guess, adapting to the times and the situation you're in.
That's true too. Thinking back to the 90s, I don't know how many people in the chat have followed 90s wrestling, especially in the early 90s and everything like that. But I mean, Bret was serviceable on a microphone. He wasn't ever awful on a microphone. He was serviceable. And the best thing about Bret Hart is that there was that in-ring that spoke for itself that a lot of us in the 90s latched onto so much that he became this hero, this, you know, almost like, I don't want to say a common guy, but a guy that we feel is not the big massive monster that we were used to from the WWF at the time. So he was kind of like this common everyday hero that was able to go up and battle these guys. And then a lot of the time after that, once he became the champion, there was these great feuds that were built around him with people that could actually bring the charisma so that you were more involved. Bret was this so sympathetic babyface character that when his brother Owen turned on him, it became one of the most dastardly things, and that you just absolutely loathed Owen Hart for what he was doing to the family and everything like that. And so you bought into Bret Hart's story at the time. And the same thing when Bob Backlund was introduced, and when Bob Backlund slaps on that chicken wing at Survivor Series, and Owen's on the outside pleading with not Martha, I believe Stu and Helen, to throw that towel in to end the match, to end the suffering. And finally, Helen goes and does it, ends the match. Bob Backlund becomes the champion. And you feel bad for Bret Hart, but the worst part is that's when the true evil Owen comes and shows himself and proves that he did this on purpose to make Bret lose. And that whole feud continued on so brilliantly into what these two were capable of doing. Owen had the charisma to help carry what Bret didn't. And so he bounced off of it, but it worked so brilliantly. And that only happened because Bret Hart became such a sympathetic babyface, because he was such a hero inside that ring to all of us in the 90s.
Yeah, and here's kind of like a similar thing too. Anything that you thought John Cena lacked, whether in terms of in-ring skills, his number one rival was Randy Orton, who I think is considered the best pro wrestler right now. So it's very amazing to see that both guys do have similarities in the sense that and I wouldn't even say Owen was Bret's number one rival. I still think it's Shawn Michaels. I think it always will be Shawn Michaels.
For sure.
And I think it for a lot of similar reasons. Like Shawn Michaels was a lot more charismatic than Bret. And whatever Bret didn't bring to the table, Shawn Michaels did, just like in the scenario with John Cena. Like whatever he didn't bring to the table, Randy Orton definitely did. So it's very interesting to kind of talk about both Cena and Bret in that retrospect, simply because they kind of do have a similar path in that end. Like their number one rivals always kind of countered to what they were really, I don't want to say bad at, but what they're, if you're to give them a weakness, what would it be? They're very good at countering that and bringing that to the table. I just wanted to bring up this when he said, but Cena, the hometown boy, throwback, you're going to have a hard time convincing two Western Canadians that Cena's a hometown boy in any circumstance. And this is something where you can't, man, you just don't do this. You can't say that Cena's more of a hometown boy when two Canadians are on the screen, brother. Just not going to work out.
Cena might be a hometown boy in his hometown, but here's the thing, Bret Hart, if you come to Canada, anywhere in Canada, it doesn't matter if he's heel, babyface, or just hanging out on the street, Bret is the biggest hero to come out of pro wrestling here in Canada. So it is an absolute sin to actually even maybe be talking about what we are here today in some ways. But again, as per the professionals we don't mind having an open debate about it at the same time and taking a little heat from our Canadian brethren.
I will also say this, though, and yes, I know it. Cena's our hometown boy and back and throw back versus he's Canadian. Sure, but I will definitely say this: when it came down to popularity when they were wrestling, Bret Hart globally was always more popular than John Cena. That is undeniable.
However, Wembley Stadium when they brought SummerSlam to the UK for the first time ever, and how packed that stadium is, massive, and it was to the rafters there. That outdid almost any WrestleMania just about in history. That it was a huge showing, and a lot of that was Bret and Davey.
Yeah, and like here's too, when we just talk about popularity stuff, like Bret was so beloved throughout the world, and then it really took him being more pro-Canadian and anti-American to get him truly booed in the U.S., which really set the tone for being a tweener, I think, because you were loved in one spot, hated the other. John Cena is the absolute king of mixed reactions. He set the stage to what Roman Reigns had to encounter down the road, nobody generated more of a mixed reaction in pro wrestling than John Cena. And I think at the end of the day, John Cena truly earned respect out of everyone who criticized his 5 moves of doom, how hokey he was. We don't want to see him in a title picture ever again. Why does he always have to be in a title picture to begin with? At the end of the day, I think he's the guy who has changed a lot of people's opinions through a body of work. Just like I thought Bret Hart had to earn his stripes to become accepted to be a guy in his size, to become the number one guy in a big man's world. He had to be a more likable champion, because if he was to ever be in a match against Hulk Hogan or Andre the Giant, he's more or less going to be squashed, because back then you were seeing the big guys always looking strong. Whereas nowadays, or back then, Bret Hart was really the epitome of the small wrestler becoming a top guy. And he kind of changed the mold and broke that mold for so many pro wrestlers. Like, would you have ever thought Rey Mysterio could have been world heavyweight champion had Bret Hart not be champion?
Not when I was young.
Shawn Michaels, even to an extent, too.
Yeah.
But with that being said, I still think John Cena, when it comes down to, and this is where we get to the sports entertainment aspect, you saw more people do in other sports, in other realms of the professional world, whether it's day-to-day stuff, than you ever saw people doing that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And because of that, and because of what we're talking about, you kind of have to think, when it comes down to that, who became a bigger star by becoming a pro wrestler. I think that's a very easy John Cena right there.
That's clearly John Cena. I mean, that alone just in his movie career so far as well, too. I mean, say what you will about the guy. I mean, he has been part of some very big blockbuster films and some very interesting blockbuster films. He's also not afraid of humility, where I find like Bret always takes himself serious, where John Cena can actually, allow himself to be a little humiliated at times. Which, I mean, it's proven in John Cena's body of work in the realm of acting, as well as like go back to a couple of years ago at WrestleMania, where he agreed to do one of the strangest WWE, I don't even want to call it a match, but things that occurred at WrestleMania when he did the Firefly Funhouse match with Bray Wyatt, something that I don't think Bret could have pulled off in the same way that John Cena had when it comes to the charisma side of things. John Cena definitely more the entertainer, more the actor than what Bret Hart ever would have been. And that's going to be proven as John Cena continues in Hollywood. I mean, look, the guy just did Suicide Squad, and his character was so unique in that he's getting a spin-off TV show based on that one character.
Yeah. Just kind of going back in the comments, Ed coming in. Would Cena be more compared to Macho Man Randy Savage if he was around in the early 90s, and Bret would be more compared to Benoit, but wouldn't stack up on the mic to Kurt or Eddie? You can, but I also feel I value Bret Hart as more of an icon than Benoit, than Kurt, than Macho. And maybe even Eddie. It's so hard, because I know nowadays it's, it's such a different monster now when you consider like who's a great. But to me, Bret Hart was the guy for a lot of people. And the impact he had just to Canadians was quite large. And this is coming from a guy who was an Owen guy and a Michaels guy, never a Bret guy. But you still cannot deny the fact that Bret really was a signal of hope and faith, and really hustle, loyalty, respect before John Cena ever was, to be quite honest. And you saw that when they went to, Europe, and Bret was just a hero there. He was the 1990s superhero for the wrestling fan.
He really was. And as a kid, when I got to meet him, it was like the greatest day of my life. Weirdly enough, it was the same day I met Owen, and Owen is just a delight. So everybody who has never had an opportunity to meet Owen Hart, he was just awesome in every way. Everything anybody ever says about Owen Hart is 100% true. The guy was just dynamite. But that said, I mean, it was, yeah, Bret Hart was that hero, and he always was, and stuff like that. I mean, Cena, for me, watching him come into things, it was like this guy was going to be something right from the start. Bret, I found, had to work for it really, really hard to become the guy. Cena, you know, I mean, he read the guy from the day that the WWE first put him out in that ring against Kurt Angle. And even before that, I remember finally getting into the whole reading of what guys were up to behind the scenes and with training and stuff back in the early 2000s there, and hearing about John Cena, the prototype in OVW, you know, coming up with the likes of Shelton Benjamin, Brock Lesnar, Randy Orton, Batista, guys like that. And I mean, this guy was exactly what they claimed to be at the time. He was the prototype. He was exactly what Vince or anybody in pro wrestling viewed as a top guy, a big, sizable guy who's got a lot of charisma to back it up, and a guy who was able to carry the weight of what was brought to him on his shoulders. He dealt with the controversial both sides booing and cheering him like nobody ever has. I mean, I don't know if anybody in this business would have the shoulder strength to carry the WWE like John Cena has done over the last decade or more of his career.
Yeah, just to get to more comments, because I want to make sure our comment section is being properly represented in here. Throwbacks, and when I counter Cena, I mean, Bret had Austin, Owen, and even Yoko in the first title run. Cena didn't have that. He had, at the time, JBL and other things. Yeah, and that's kind of the fault of, you know, a brand split too, because that really limited the amount of guys John Cena had to work with.
Yeah.
Whereas Bret kind of had the open book. And let's be honest, Bret had a lot of say on who he got to work with there. But needless to say, that has nothing to do with, you know, who would win in a fantasy match or anything like that. Or even just like, you know, a dream match necessarily. But with that being said, yeah, I'll just one second.
For sure.
I think it's unfair to pigeonhole a guy based on a situation. Not that I'm saying you're doing that throwback, but when a brand extension comes in, that's exactly what you're doing to your superstars and your talent. You are kind of restricting who they can go with, whereas back in the 90s, Bret Hart didn't have that. And kind of took me to his other point of, to me, Cena's two biggest rivals when he was in WWE. One is in AEW and the other one is on Raw, Edge and Punk. The pipe bomb was done when Cena's in the ring. And again, I will just say Randy Orton to me is his number one rival through and through. Even Batista for John Cena to me was a big one as well. And
yeah. And I mean, I'm going to go back to the first run of Bret Hart, which people tend to overlook a little bit too. We're talking, this was not his first run necessarily when he starts feuding with guys like Austin or even Owen for that matter. We're talking the first title run, which he spent a lot of time on Superstars of Wrestling and on the early stages of Monday Night Raw, challenging guys. And I'm not arguing that this Max Moon, Virgil, Marty Jannetty were guys that Bret was in there going up against Razor Ramon. And not to take anything away from Scott Hall and Razor Ramon, he was not Vince's guy to be the next WWF champion at the time. And this was all prior to him losing the title to Yokozuna at WrestleMania 9 and them flopping it immediately over to Hulk Hogan. It really wasn't until that successful second run when he finally beat Yokozuna that he became that big hero and started to have those more dynamic feuds with guys like Owen and Austin and stuff like that. So initially that run wasn't really that much better than Cena's initial run either.
Yeah. Also, how ironic is it that the first guy that Bret Hart beat the WWF title at the time with now is the exact guy John Cena holds the record for the most championships with, just to kind of bring that full circle. But before we kind of go there, we do have to make sure that we're touching back to our whether it's sponsor stuff. So I want to talk about, like, if we're talking about hometown boys earlier, I mean, let's talk about, you know, internally our hometown boys, our genitals. And because of that, we want to make sure we're taking great care of them. So let's show a video of our boy Zach unboxing his new homegrown products, and that is his Manscaped products, which you can.
Hi friends, Zach from lovewrestling.ca here, and I'm here with a package generously given to us from our new friends at manscaped.com. I just thought I'd take the time to unbox and share the contents with you here today. The first thing I want to say is I really appreciate the discretion of this packaging. I need more secrets with my postman, not less. Okay, so first thing I got here is a t-shirt. Your balls will thank you. You mean that figuratively, right? Like they're not gonna, become sentient and make decisions for me. They already make enough decisions for me. When I was unpackaging it, I really appreciated the discretion here, but I also, I admire the confidence and the boldness on the very back of this t-shirt. I have been excited about this for days. Get the big packaging out of the way. Big package. Holy cow. I did not expect this. This is impressive. Most slowly with the blade side up. Always use with care. I think I can do that. 4.0 will help reduce nicks, folks, but you gotta use it properly. There's a pull thing. There's a pull tab underneath. Jesus, box never ends. It's like a little adventure. Got some crop preserver, anti-chafing ball deodorant. Very refreshing. Very nice, pleasant odor. It's not like perfumey. It's just like, it's just very fresh. I like that. And then we got the crop reviver. Sorry about the glare. That's awful. So I got the preserver and the revivers. If I forget to use the preserver, then I got the reviver to help me. I've played RPGs. And lastly, the main event. There it is, the Lawnmower 4.0. Very nice, very light. It says I'm supposed to charge it first, but I'm wondering. Oh yeah, there we go. Can hear that baby purr. Oh, it's got a little light too. How handy is that? Well, friends, this is a very nice product. If you want to get your hand on the Lawnmower 4.0 from Manscaped, just head over to manscaped.com, and I'm even going to do you one better. Just enter our promo code LOVEWRESTLING. You're going to get 20% off, and you're going to get free shipping. How good is that? And thank you once again to manscaped.com for this very generous Lawnmower 4.0 and accessories and t-shirt. My name is Zach Ralph. Thanks for tuning in.
And there it is. There's Zach opening up his big package that he got with Manscaped. Make sure you go to manscaped.com, put in the keyword promo code Love Wrestling to get 20% off and free shipping. Yeah, I mean, how cool is it that we got Manscaped with Love Wrestling now? I mean, changing the game for our lower region. I mean, but you know what is changing the game? Bret Hart versus John Cena. That's what.
Oh, yeah.
Whether it's an attitude adjustment or a sharpshooter, they are definitely taking care of business. But, I mean, we're about an hour in. Let's say are you ready to close it off, or do you want to keep going?
As long as the chat wants to keep going. This might be the busiest chat I've seen on a Sunday brunch yet, and it's only one topic. So this is fantastic. As long as you guys want to keep us going, I'm ready to keep going.
Well, I know there's more comments to put up. No one ever cut a promo in my memory on Bret, the type of promo as Punk did to Cena. And then Ed coming in was saying, throwback, don't forget, Cena eventually got HBK, Triple H, Orton, Punk, and Edge. Very, very nicely put. And then you just pulled the 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon with Bacon, which... I mean, nice. There you go, throwback. Now you're talking Canadian when you're throwing up bacon. So, keep going. I'm stuck at work. Well, I mean, yeah.
Sure, why not?
I mean, and we're talking no better workers than John Cena and Bret Hart right now.
We're talking an ultimate WrestleMania type match, and that's just around the corner here. So this is kind of a cool way to kick off the end of this year.
Yeah, and we can also, I think too, now is kind of the point where, so don't be like Brett and stop 1 hour. You need to keep pushing that 1 hour mark. Hey, man.
No, that was below the belt. That was
60 minutes is a draw. That extra 6 minutes was not in the promo sheet, but I mean, whatever. I'm a Michaels guy. He won, so. But yeah, I mean, if we can get to achievements now, if we can get to those kind of part, yeah, we can kind of key in on the 16-time world championship. But I mean, cool. That's a number. I don't know about you, but I mean, you can tell me you won this many championships. That's fine. But in pro wrestling, if your reigns are like one day, like who cares, right? Where's the sizzle to the steak, and the steak being your title reign? I don't think it's really anything to be said. But when Bret Hart was champion, he really took the title, elevated every time he was champion. Whereas John Cena didn't do that as often as Bret, but what he did do was reach to the top of the mountain more often. So when it comes to that from a title standpoint, I mean, what say you on there? But then we also talk about John Cena's multiple Royal Rumble wins. We can talk about Bret Hart's King of the Ring. I'll let you kind of ship the boat right now.
Yeah, I mean, arguably, yeah, you do have the King of the Ring is a great argument for Bret Hart, the first ever one to win that back when the King of the Ring meant that you actually went the distance and 3 guys in one single night. So, yeah, I mean, Bret Hart locked up with Bam Bam Bigelow, I believe, in the final, which was a hell of a match. But yeah, I mean, those Royal Rumbles, I mean, you want to talk about having to go to the distance. I mean, John Cena and those things, I mean, you're talking about a multitude of guys coming at you with every intent to beat the snot out of you. And John Cena has lived through them and got to the end. And, you know, I mean, ultimately headlined some of the biggest WrestleMania matches at the same time. While Bret has headlined WrestleMania, I think the drawing power for the WWE during the time that John Cena was champion, you got to argue that those WrestleManias were probably viewed more and seen by a lot more people in the audience. The capacity crowds only got larger for WrestleManias during that time that Cena was really at the top of the ladder.
Yeah. If I was to think titles and reigns, it's always weird because I'm always on a different scale than a lot of people. I'm always thinking of like when they're a champion, who did they actually drop it to and how meaningful was it? Because that's really a testament of what they did as champion. And I look at, you know, whether it's John Cena, and he really helped kind of set the mold for what became to be one of the better moments as of late on WrestleMania, and that was Daniel Bryan finally becoming champion when he lost the World Heavyweight title to the WWE Championship to Daniel Bryan at SummerSlam before eventually it being cashed in. So he kind of helped make Daniel Bryan. I feel John Cena has made the same amount of stars, or at least has put in the work to make the same amount of stars as Bret Hart, if not even more. I feel Bret Hart was not perceived to be that top of the food chain kind of guy as much as John Cena was. So much too, I didn't see. I mean, maybe it is a difference of not enough star power now to back then. But I always looked as Bret Hart's, you know, when he was done with a championship and it went to somebody else, with the exception of it being Yoko to Hulk, there's always those circumstances where it's just, yeah, I should have just kept it on Bret. Fucking Hulk Hogan.
That's a different show in a different time.
But, I mean, there's this one right here. Cena's U.S. title run late in his career. He used to elevate a ton of young talent, and at the end of his career, he gone out his way to make younger stars, and he wasn't able to be doing that during prep. I mean, that's just it, though, too, right? Like,
did Bret get that opportunity, though, after getting concussed by Goldberg and ending his career early on?
I don't think Bret had to do it in WCW ever. I think and that was part of the misusing of Bret in WCW. But when it came down to WWE, I mean, his match against 1-2-3 Kid really took the Razor Ramon match and kind of elevated 1-2-3 Kid in a different level. He really made Owen more of a main event guy, and the perception is that he did what he can with British Bulldog during the time, too.
Classic with Piper. I mean, yeah. he put Bob Backlund, a heel Bob Backlund, the guy that was the babyface of WWF for his entire 5-year WWF championship run. He put this guy over as the biggest heel in the company at the time.
And Bret Hart was very instrumental to helping what I believe is one of the biggest stars in pro wrestling in Stone Cold Steve Austin. So
very true.
Bret is definitely a catalyst of making some really big time stars. But then you have John Cena, and he's really helped elevated a lot of what we call the indie darlings to become superstars in the world of WWE too. He was very essential in AJ Styles becoming a star in WWE. He was very as the best honk in the business. Canadian Goose is coming in. Hello, Goosey. How are you, my friend? And then you also have Randy Orton, and like parallel to him, like I don't know if Randy Orton would be where he is if John Cena wasn't there from day one, kind of put against them. And they really didn't really compete until they became world champions. But I mean, the proof is in their pudding. They really became stars with when working with each other. So, and then, I don't know, the matches with Sami Zayn really kind of made me perceive Sami Zayn to be an instant star right off the bat, too. Rusev, another big one. Cesaro as well. Like, there's been a lot of guys for each where they helped elevate. I can make the same thing about Hakushi. I never cared enough about Hakushi until he was in the ring with Bret Hart. But so when it came down to what they did for other superstars, that I think is, I'm going to say this, I think it's a tie between the two.
Yeah, they both love the business so much that they were always willing to do it, especially for the right guys. I mean, everybody always talks about John Cena burying guys, but I don't know so much that he ever buried anyone, as he was doing exactly what Vince wanted him to do. He was out there being Vince's guy and doing his job and doing it very, very extremely well. Bret Hart, always the same. Bret Hart was not going to argue with the boss at any point in time. He was, honored to be considered as the WWF champion. And when Vince gave him that opportunity, when Vince told him what was going to go down out there, Bret was willing to do that particular job. I mean, you can conceive it as burying, because the dirt sheets want to tell you that John Cena is influential in what he had done to certain guys, but John Cena also knew how to protect his business, just like Bret did. And a lot of the guys, especially in the old school of professional wrestling, they knew how to protect their business. They knew that they had to go out there. They needed to make money. They knew that the company also needed to thrive. So there is, of course, going to be guys that they particularly want to see get over, that they're going to help to elevate in that sense. And it helps the business when they do such things. And I think you're right. 100% Bret Hart and John Cena both were gracious in that sense of the word game.
Yeah, and I'm going to respond to Ed's. I care about Hakushi more than you care about El Dandy.
Hate that, Ed.
I mean,
No.
that's not a shot. It's just like,
Yeah,
it's just like, I loved Hakushi. I thought he was like, I would have, man, like Hakushi was my like Rusev back in the 90s. I would have loved to see Hakushi kind of be given that opportunity. Like Rusev should have been given that opportunity. But yeah, like to me, like we're now kind of really solidifying kind of where we kind of select guys in these things. Another one we haven't talked about when it comes down to presentation, whether it's entrance, whether it's ring attire. I mean, come on, we're talking all facets of pro wrestling here. You're going to have to stay tuned to more Love Wrestling programming to find out. There's my diplomatic answer for that question. Because I'm gonna give you the Venkman Ghostbusters answer when it's like, where did we get the money? I don't know. And then
I mean, you could argue right away on that one about Natalya and the comparison to Bret Hart immediately.
But
that's as far as I'm going with that.
To me, I'd actually go, if I'm really honest, I'd go Charlotte to Trish, to be quite honest. That would be my comparison if I'm really just making one up on the spot.
Next Sunday on Sunday Brunch.
But like, no, with that, like presentation, when it came down to, entrances, attires, things like that. I think when it comes down to attire, simply boom, Bret Hart wins. That's beyond a shadow of a doubt. But man, the entrance game, like when it came down to those entrances, I mean, nobody made themselves look more big than John Cena when it came to that realm. So I give the entrance to John Cena. Attire I give to Bret Hart, because Bret Hart's ring gear I always think is a great topic to talk about that we don't really talk about. But I always thought Bret Hart had, more sense when the Attitude Era came. He had really cool gear made, especially that one that he wore at Survivor Series against Stone Cold when he added the gold. Like, to me, that's still an iconic logo, just ring gear for me. But presentation of a star is kind of where I was getting to. Who presented themselves to be a star when they were in WWF, WWE? Because I don't think this is a clear-cut runaway for John Cena.
I do have to argue in favor of John Cena taking the edge out of this one. I think he presented himself as more of a star. In terms, again, that charisma game plays huge into this. Bret Hart presented himself more as a champion, especially when you think of old school ways of presenting yourself as a champion. You're a guy who took that title around the world, held it with respect, with grace, got out there. You were a fighting champion. John Cena maybe didn't bring that level of respect, but in terms of charisma and moments, John Cena definitely edges Bret out in this sense. I mean, as goofy as it is, the spin disc championship change came about from John Cena and was used multiple times. Therefore, after that title design was built around John Cena and his character at the time that it happened.
That did happen.
Sure. Yeah.
That did happen. And guess what? With one eye, he also couldn't see that he did it either. Boom. I mean, we couldn't go this podcast without calling out Jean-Pierre Lafitte. Come on.
I think arguing Bret's attire too. I mean, we got to remember that Bret did not initially want that particular attire. When you go back to his Stampede Wrestling days, Bret fought in black trunks. That was it. Straight black trunks. He was his clean-cut, regular wrestling guy as you could get inside that ring. That personality came about when he teamed with Jim the Anvil Neidhart. It was Neidhart's idea to go with the pink and black attire, symbolizing the Hart name and stuff like that. So, I mean, all credit has to go to Jim Neidhart when it comes to Bret's attire working for him. Bret had no interest in that particular color scheme when it first came about.
Which is really kind of funny when you think about it, because when you think about the creativity of how you're presenting, just from a gear standpoint, we had Bret just want to go to the plain black, but then we also are pairing him against a guy who decided to wear jean shorts. And, like, talk about the level of originality with that. I mean, we're talking about a black and white rainbow, for heaven's sake, with this. But at the same time, when John Cena was the doctor of Thugonomics, he wore some pretty outlandish gear as well. Like, he really, went a 360 on the presentation on that. But also before then, I fudged that word up big time. I'm very aware of that.
Good.
But at the same time, John Cena also bought a boatload of gear with different color patterns just to match, a local sports team. I think what they said, they bought like over 70 pairs of boots and gear and knee pads just so he can match. So, I mean, that alone already showed more originality than Bret's black gear that he wanted to do. But needless to say, Bret really took the ball and kind of rolled with it once the Hart Foundation kind of selected their color pattern and went in, because he really made that look iconic more to him, whereas John Cena then kind of has made the jean shorts look very iconic for him as well. So the fact that remains, they both made their own looks iconic. Like, who's the last guy in pro wrestling that you really saw with a singlet and long tights now? Like, is there one that really
made it stand out? Not
Like,
Any I remember in recent history, anyway.
and that's just, and like Cena with all the different throwback, pun intended, I'm assuming, and team jersey. Yeah, and that's kind of what John Cena resembled, was kind of more, I don't want to say revolutionary because it wasn't really revolutionary, but more fresh. But I mean, at the same time, I mean, he went into the rap world there, and what we definitely see in the rap world is a trend, definitely a fashion trend that is different from the norm. Therefore, that is what John Cena represented during his time as being a doctor of thugonomics as well.
So here's an idea. I want to throw this one at you, Parrish, right now, because it just came to mind. With WrestleMania being right around the corner, we're only a few months away. If this match ultimately was booked with both guys in their prime going into it, how do you approach John Cena's character going into this whole thing? I mean, obviously, Bret Hart, he's a technician. He's going to go in. Bret Hart is always just Bret Hart. But John Cena, do we bring out the Doctor of Thugonomics, or do you go with the John Cena that we've seen in the last, say, 5-6 years?
Am I doing this as a one-term match, or am I doing this like
this
Rumble
is a one-off
WrestleMania
one-off right now.
But are we doing a setup here, or are we just going straight into the match?
Let's go set up to this thing.
Okay, if I'm going setup, if I'm Bret Hart, I'm getting in the head of Bret Hart 100%. Because if there's one thing that I learned from Shawn Michaels, is that it's very easy to get inside Bret's head when it comes to the build-up. He really got annoyed with Shawn Michaels to the build-up. Whether it's the shots and the jabs that Shawn Michaels took, whether they were a little offside or not, despite that, he got inside Bret Hart's head. So if I'm John Cena, I'm getting inside Bret Hart's head as much as I can there, because you want to do whatever you can to throw him off. But when the bell comes, you know that you're going to get the absolute best, somebody who's on their game every single time. When they talked about not having a bad match, I think Bret Hart is up there for never having a bad match. Everything he did was very good, very consistent, and really done as well as anybody can do it. So you really got to go into knowing that's what you're going to get. If you're not expecting that, then you're doing yourself a disservice already. John Cena's best approach, I think, going into a match with Bret Hart is to get him as uncomfortable as humanly possible. Bret Hart does not like to be thrown around. We've seen that. That is something that really gets to him in the course of a match. So yes, his power really does have to go there. So he has to make sure that if he's ever in a hold, he always has to make sure that he's fighting out. He always has to make sure that he's going out. So if he has to play a little bit of a slow burn in this match, then you do that. But you also do the same way with the promos, the build-ups. You get as much of an edge as you can. You don't necessarily have to take cheap shots to make those statements, but what you could. And because of that, that will allow you to get inside Bret Hart's head more. Because if there's one weakness Bret Hart has, is that he takes everything emotional. So if you can play on that card leading up, you have the edge before the bell.
That's fair. That's very fair. So, I mean, if I'm doing this thing into WrestleMania and stuff like that, the build for me has to go back to Bret being the hero, especially to Canadians and stuff. And you build this like the old fashioned country versus country type thing. You bring Bret in as clearly the guy who represents everything that is to be Canadian wrestling and stuff like that. The hero that stands for everything good and wholesome inside that ring. And Cena comes in as that guy who's pro USA. Everything about the US is stronger, bigger, faster. And he comes in as that guy. He's going to play it off a little bit heelish, which we know Cena is very capable of. And we know that he's going to be that guy that he can accept being booed and being torn apart by the fans on hand. And I think we play on that a little bit. We play that Cena is, yes, pro USA, and he might get cheered as a pro American and everything like that. But at the same time, we got Bret Hart, the guy who's going to go in there saying that, he's going to out outmatch Cena inside that ring with his skill and stuff like that. And I think we play it off that. We're talking about two legends here. We know that no matter what, if we were to take them both right now here today to book for WrestleMania, but at their absolute best, that no matter what, it's going to be polarizing. There's going to be people that are pro Bret Hart, pro John Cena. But at the end of the day, as always, I think that you're going to, image-wise, be better off putting Cena in the victory at WrestleMania and having Bret Hart have to learn his lessons from it and have to come back to overcome Cena in, say, a SummerSlam match down the road. I think ultimately, first off, you got to have Cena picking up the victory at a WrestleMania.
I like what you said, but I'm also going to take your question and turn it around to you now. If you're Bret Hart going in to a match set up with John Cena, if you're Bret Hart, how do you look at getting the edge heading into the match against a John Cena?
Well, first of all, you got to study the game. That's just it. You've got to study what works about John Cena, where his weaknesses have been. Study the matches that he has particularly come up at with the losses and stuff like that too. How have some of his opponents got to John Cena? What has bettered him? You got to look at matches like against Brock Lesnar. Why wasn't Cena able to come back with anything to answer Brock Lesnar's Suplex City and stuff like that? What could Bret do differently in order to counter what Brock was doing, in order to better mentally prepare himself for how to defeat a guy like John Cena? Obviously, John Cena it's rare that he can be broken down, but it's also clear that he can be broken down. So Bret Hart, it all comes down to the mentality. He has to be able to mentally prepare himself, get in the game, and maybe even get inside the head of John Cena a little bit, make John Cena realize that there's a reason they call him the best there is, the best there was, and the best there ever will be, and that he's going to deliver something John Cena has never seen inside the squared circle before, and psychologically get inside the brain of John Cena like that.
Now, the bell hits. John Cena's on one side. He's doing his thing to get ready. Bret Hart, doing his thing to get ready. Bell hits. They come face to face. Do you think the old school collar elbow tie-up is the best? Let me rephrase that. Does this match begin with a face-off or a collar elbow tie-up?
I think this one begins with a face-off, especially the first off. And if you're going to do it at a WrestleMania, it starts with a bit of a face-off. I think from there, again, I think Cena plays a little bit dirty here. This is the kind of guy that pie faces Bret a little bit, and then maybe you go to a collar and elbow tie-up. I think in the better way to do that collar and elbow tie-up, because Bret's so known for getting into that and being so good at what he does, is to have Cena counter Bret Hart for the first little bit too, to really play up the idea that, oh, holy shit, this guy has been studying Bret Hart, the complete opposite to what you would expect. You would expect Cena to play the psychology game, but if John Cena comes out looking strong on his wrestling game, suddenly he gets a little bit in the head of Bret Hart, and suddenly the tone of the match changes right off the hop. I think that would be an excellent way for this thing to kick off.
Mm-hmm. See, I think the one thing you would want to do as if you're Bret Hart, because I think John Cena would expect you don't want to lock up, go hold right away. If I was Bret, I'd switch it up. I'd give him a good shot to the face, and right when he does that, you duck it, you go behind, put him in a hold, spin around, give him another shot, and then you revolt back to wrestling as the transition. So by the time you have stunned him a little bit with a couple shots, then you can get the hold in. I think you really have to go in that route. You almost kind of break him down. Bret Hart was I think it was his matches with Diesel at the time when he said, yeah, wrestling Diesel, it's like going up against a big tree. It's like, I'm not going to be able to, get the tree to my size, but what I have to do is I have to kick him down to my size. And guess what? Everybody's the same size when they're on their knees. And I think that's very comparable, because when you look at John Cena, when he's, lying down or whatever, he's not going to be able to use his strength nearly as much as he can. So Bret Hart needs to wear John Cena down, and I think you do that from the get-go. So if Bret Hart really needs to get a good start against John Cena, that's exactly what he should do in the sense of mixing it up. if I'm John Cena and I want to get a good start with Bret Hart, then no matter what, you hope to God that you're actually starting off in wrestling holds, because you can then use your power to throw them off. And then that's when you're doing it, because when Bret Hart's frame is getting thrown, boom, that's damage, right? We go back to the wrestling game now. When you got that little guy in the corner showing you how much damage you have, that's kind of where we are now, because that's what's going to set the tone for, your cardio and, how much more you're able to push when the 40 minutes come into play. I just don't, I have a feeling Bret Hart is going to dictate the beginning of this match. That is exactly how I think this match starts, but I think John Cena, like normal, he might not dictate the beginning, but what he does is he's the first one to make that first, no, we're going this way, because he always knows how to transition to his own favor. And whether or not that's more of a impactful move, or if that's more of a natural, what he's prone to do kind of thing, he's always that first guy to say, this ain't working, I'm doing this. Or Bret Hart kind of wants to stick to the game plan a little bit. He believes in that game plan, and he believes that if he does this longer it goes, it's going to benefit me. John Cena, I do believe, will be more adaptive as this match goes on, where Bret Hart is going to have a specific laid out plan. And I think that might actually favor John Cena in that important part of the match where all the damage is done. And that's right, the 10, 20, but 10 to 20 minute mark of this match. I think that's very important for John Cena to execute against Bret.
Yeah, and I think that goes back to what I was saying earlier too, is that maybe I'm slipping up a little bit here now as I'm starting to lose my thought. I mean, this goes back to, John Cena is probably going to dominate, or not dominate, but he's going to probably have that adaptability to conquer Bret Hart in a first off matchup. Again, Bret Hart's best key attributes are learning from what he's already done against guys and coming back from what he's done against guys. Bret Hart, a lot of the time, was put into these top feuds with guys and typically lost the first matchup that he had with them. I mean, Owen is another perfect example of that. Bob Backlund, another example of it. And he always came back better than before. But if we're talking a one-off matchup, yeah, you got to give the edge to John Cena, feeling like his adaptability off the start would actually overcome Bret Hart's. And then it would take Bret Hart another return matchup to really overcome the capabilities of John Cena.
Yeah. And yeah, even with the Stone Cold Steve Austin, because when we kind of want to think, like, that first match they had, really the big match. Like, I know like Bret Hart, Ringmaster, I think, had a couple, but that real big time match when it was WrestleMania 13, people forget, like, even though, yeah, Bret did win, he actually didn't actually beat him. Like, there's something in Bret that needs that tap out. He needs that pinfall. He needs that. And I think that's going to his detriment, where he needs an exact finish to be content. Whereas John Cena, he's okay with a win, no matter what style of a win they are, because he knows at the end of the day, his job is to pick up the W. Whereas Bret knows this, but he gets really stuck on needing to decide what kind of W he ends up getting. And I think that at the end of the day is Bret's downfall, is the emotional attachment to what he's doing. And I think that at the end of the day is what costs him this match. But like you said, if there was a match 2, he counters and he really comes back very strong with that. He does not make the same mistake twice.
No, exactly. And I think we're both in agreement on that. And I think, when we break it down, I think we're both in agreement overall that both these guys, absolute living legends of professional wrestling, both have their weaknesses and their strengths. And going into a one-off match, I think we both could agree that I think ultimately John Cena would come out victorious in a one-off. I think in a longevity thing, Bret, as always, manages to overcome and stuff like that. So there would be that longevity for Bret Hart. But as a one-off, I think John Cena would definitely take it. I think at the end of the day, who is better? I mean, we're better off, I think, as wrestling fans to have ever been able to witness the work of these two individuals. I don't care what side of the fence you sit on. Both these guys are great living legends of professional wrestling, and I think I got to throw my absolute respect to both guys for what they ever accomplished.
Yeah, and I want everyone to look at the background here. It says, who is better, John Cena, Bret Hart? What you will not see is a question mark, because this ain't a question. This is a debate, and the debate is giving you our thoughts on how we can break down a fantasy match between John Cena and Bret Hart. We're not ones to decide who's better, because this is an open forum. Everyone can have their own debate on whether or not they think one is better than the other. But what we don't know is who actually is. We're just breaking down of what we think will happen in this. What I do love about this is that I think this is one of those matches that I don't think a lot of people would have really ever wanted. But I do think when it's all said and done, this could have been one of the most iconic matches that we will talk about for a long time. I think we're talking about two very polarizing and two of the most polarizing characters in their time, whether it's you're very if you were watching the WWF, WWE product with Bret Hart, you either loved him or you didn't like him. I don't think I'm wrong about that one. You're either a Bret Hart guy or you weren't.
Yep.
The exact same thing goes to John Cena. We just heard it a lot more loudly, a lot more decisively with John Cena every time. So I'm going to put this. If you were to see these two wrestle once today, given the fact that they're ready to go, nobody was retired, nobody's out of their prime, because I will probably say it's a fair thing to say both Bret and John Cena are no longer in their prime in pro wrestling. I don't think. Is this a match that you think Dave Meltzer would give 5 stars to?
Not a chance in hell. I'm sorry, Dave Meltzer has his certain things he likes, and that's the thing about wrestling personalities and fans and everything. We have certain things we like, and this is not Meltzer's type of match, whether there's a good build to it or not. He might enjoy it. He might give it a 3, maybe even a 4 if they're lucky. I don't see this as a Meltzer personally enjoying 5-star matchup.
No, I wouldn't, because I don't think Omega or Danielson even comes close to John Cena.
No. And I mean, all things aside, I'm not really that big of an Omega fan other than when he's working with the right guy. And Danielson, I mean, I can see the comparison there in terms of the work rate inside the ring with Bret Hart for sure. But I don't think Kenny Omega even holds a candle to John Cena. I mean, fight me on that one, but that's personal opinion.
I'm going to take this time now to kind of go through what Love Wrestling has coming up in this week.
Good plan.
Yeah, we don't really have a graphic, needless to say. I believe there was a little event this week that was, taking everybody a little bit outside of their game plan. I don't know if you've heard of it. It's called Christmas. Not everyone was available to, do everything. So we don't have a graphic for it. But what we do have is we definitely have the legacy of Britt Baker, MD, or DMD. Yeah, whatever.
DMD.
Yeah, I'm drinking, so whatever.
Doctor of Medical Dentistry.
Yeah. Whatever. But yeah, no, make sure you check out Josh Robinson's version of the legacy of featuring Britt Baker. Absolutely fantastic work that Josh does. It's definitely a must watch if you like this. We also have Turnbuckle Talk this week, and what they have, and I'm reading this, is Carl Carafel and Bubba Duke presenting the first annual Mighty Joe Awards Turnbuckle Rewind matches in the drive as well. So make sure you check out both shows. If you want a little bit of inside knowledge on what some of the awards are for the first annual Mighty Joe Awards, we got categories such as Male Wrestler of the Year, Female Wrestler of the Year, Tag Team of the Year, Feud of the Year, Best Superstar or Supercard Show, Best Weekly Show, Best Commentary Team, and Promotion of the Year. So make sure you check that out. I believe it's at Tuesday at 6:05 Eastern Time. And then you also want to make sure that you're checking out Between Two Beards, one of the flagship shows of Love Wrestling, where they're guaranteed to blow the budget every week, and Spencer's lid is going to fly off, which is absolutely going to be fantastic for me because it just gives me one extra advantage of beating them every time we do POS, which may or may not happen for this weekend when it comes down to next weekend at day one. But then you also want to make sure that you're checking the Power Hour that has both Josh and JPJ as well. Make sure you're checking out everything. I believe Goose, you can throw it in the call. There it is. We got the Goose call Wednesday at 2 p.m. where Goose, correct me if I'm wrong, but you have a plethora of members from Changing the Game, talking about the Change of the Game Battle Royal that was there. Am I correct on that? That was the first ever pro wrestling debut of the Love Wrestling Elite Championship. You're welcome. And then, we got also, I think Blowing Off Stream is coming back this Saturday, I think. I'm not too sure on that, but also go check that out next Sunday.
Is Changing the Game not being aired on New Year's Day, if I'm not mistaken, as well, too? We might want to mention.
I don't know.
Oh, okay. I thought I saw something about that, but maybe I'm wrong.
Quite possibly. I know. Goose, let me know. We're coming in dry on information here. We're just, so we don't know. Voting is still. Oh, there we go. Voting is still open for the Mighty Joe Awards at Turnbuckle Talk social pages. So there you go. Make sure you're checking that out. Turnbuckle Talk, if you want to kind of just throw out what your handle is right now, I mean, I could direct guys where to go vote for said awards. January 1st, Change the Game airs, so you are correct. So on day one, which actually is the birth date of Love Wrestling. So we become 1 year old on January 1. Yeah, the first. And there it is at TB Talk Pod on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. So make sure you go and check that out. Bobby, where can we find you? What do you have coming up?
Oh, always got episodes of Ring Respect Radio coming up. We got a big announcement that just dropped yesterday. Prairie Pro Wrestling back January 15th in Saskatoon. You know what? I'm going to get the title wrong, but it's like 685 days later, a reference to how long it's been since we held the first round of our championship title tournament. So excitingly enough, the title tournament's back on for Prairie Pro Wrestling. Looking forward to it.
Yes, and I'm also making sure that I reference Power Out and NXT this week. Make sure you check out those shows. Absolutely fantastic shows done by Zach, Astrid, Cody, and Ed. You want to make sure you check that out as well. If you're in the Edmonton area, make sure you check out Real Canadian Wrestling tonight on Boxing Day, as they are having a show at the Norwood Legion. Tickets at the door. Go to Eventbrite for your tickets. I will not be there tonight. I am making sure I'm getting crunk with the family. I'm doing that. But also make sure if you're in any area and you have an opportunity to go check out any independent wrestling show, you do so, because you never know who you might see. I always throw the sign of the first independent show I was at was in 2003, and I saw Kenny Omega. I hear he's done some good things lately in pro wrestling. So, again, you just never know who you might see at a pro wrestling independent show. Yes, and our good old friend Goose will be at the show tonight fighting Tyrone Ironside. So, Goose, luck is for losers, as my new CM Punk shirt behind here would say. But I know you're going to give a honking performance, and that is something to spend a loony on. So for Bobby, I am Chris Parrish. Make sure you support everything Love Wrestling. I'm going to throw up the graphics here, whether it's ratethispodcast.com/lovewrestlingca. Make sure you help us become our #1 podcast. If you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, make sure you go to twitch.tv/lovewrestlingca, which I believe there might be some changes being made to as of January 1st. Stay tuned for more. We also have, again, our YouTube. Make sure you check out our shop where you can get, I believe, the Live, Laugh, Love Wrestling shirts, I believe now. Get your orders in on that. We got mugs. We got fanny packs. We have stickers. We have a lot of cool stuff in case you messed up and didn't get anything for anybody on Christmas. And you're like, oh, no, where do I go to get really cool stuff? There you go. And our K-Athletics one. Make sure you check them out, and also make sure that you follow our beautiful sponsors at manscaped.com. Promo code Love Wrestling, 20% off and free shipping. Always pretty cool. So yeah, in closing, I'm Chris Parrish. This is Bobby Munson. We are saying thank you for joining us. Hope you enjoyed the episode of Sunday Brunch. Who is better, John Cena, Bret Hart? Have a great rest of your Boxing Day, and see you next week.